Well, it's 5 o'clock, so I welcome everybody to the City Planning Committee meeting for this evening, the 2nd of November. And we have with us Alderman Briscoe, Councillor Harvey, Alderman Barakis, Councillor Dutta, and I think Councillor Coates or Councillor Sherlock is here at the minute. I'll wait to see where Councillor Coates is. Okay, before we kick off with the business, I just wanted to acknowledge the passing of Mr. Barry Holmes, who was a really important part of the planning unit in the City of Hobart. Barry died in the middle of last month. And he commenced work with the Hobart City Council on the 19th of October 1981 as Senior Planner in a Development Appraisal role, having moved from Albury-Wodonga. And he retired in October 2014. So many of us had the pleasure of being guided through statutory planning, such that is, including the introduction of significant planning schemes such as the City of Hobart Planning Scheme, Sullivan's Cove, and the new interim planning scheme during his 33 years with Hobart City Council. After starting in 1981, Barry then progressed to Assistant Director in the role for planning, which had responsibility for both development appraisal and strategic land use planning, and importantly, the oversight of the new City of Hobart planning scheme of 1982. Apparently, Barry had some interesting times, Mr. Noy has told me, with getting the council to line up behind the new scheme. And I don't know if you were around at that time, Alderman Briscoe, but apparently all aldermen walked out of the Lady Osborne room in protest that the draft new scheme was a Machiavellian plot led by the staff.
No, it wasn't me.
He and fellow officers obviously did a great job to get all of the elected members back into the room and to finally agree to the scheme. Barry was charged with the responsibility of assessing the Civic Square proposal, so it's not something necessarily new for us. And he was chosen by council as the proposal that was chosen by council was the preferred development for the site, but he was concerned about that and thought that it should be refused. And so there would have been a significant amount of political pressure on him to recommend approval, but Barry, being the ultimate professional, and according to the late Barry Southern, and the clarity of understanding of the scheme and what was appropriate for this site, recommended it not be approved, and his position was ultimately vindicated by when the proposal was abandoned by the council. Barry was also given the task of managing the Central Area Strategic Plan, CASP as it's known, and the issue papers are still referred to some 20 years later. Barry had also the great foresight in identifying the potential of the South Hobart rivulet as a riparian reserve and pedestrian link from the city to mountain. Of course, we know how important that is for the residential or the recreational amenity for our citizens. In 1995, Mr. Noy was appointed Director of Planning, and Mr. Holmes had a new title of Manager with a single focus on strategic land use planning. In 1997, Barry took on the task of delivering the Sullivan's Cove planning scheme, which I remember well, going through clause by clause. And that was undertaken and delivered in the space of 12 months, which is no mean feat for a planning scheme. Barry's Barry's final milestone achievement before retiring was the beginning of the draft interim Hobart planning scheme. This was done with the great assistance of Mr. James McElhenney, who has recently retired, but has been managed by Barry, had been managed for Barry for a number of years through the various shifts in state government positions on the statewide planning scheme template. As I said before, Barry retired in October 2014. He left a great legacy of positive planning outcomes for the City of Hobart, but his greatest legacy has been the numerous planners that he has mentored and nurtured over the years to take on consultancy and leadership roles in the profession. And I certainly appreciated the understanding and care he took when doing his committee work for us. So on behalf of this committee, I'd like to acknowledge his tremendous contribution in planning in our beautiful city and send condolences to his wife Jan and 2 daughters. So did you want to say something, Alderman Briscoe?
Yeah, Chair, I endorse everything you say. I wonder if I could suggest to you that we have a minute's silence at the next full council meeting as an appreciation of his tremendous work. And there's another person that has recently been deceased as well, not directly to the planning matter, but I wonder if you could suggest the Lord Mayor we have a minute's silence at the next council meeting for Mr.
Will do.
Holmes.
Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Okay, so we have Councillor Coates here as well. So we have the full composite of the committee. Item 2 is confirmation of minutes. Can I have somebody move the minutes, please? Thank you, Alderman Barakis. Is there any dissent from those acceptance of those minutes? I take that as no dissent. Thank you. I declare those passed. Item 3, consideration of supplementary items. We got supplementary items, or is it? There are. So Alderman Barakis, you've moved those. Thank you. Any dissent? No dissent. I declare that carried. Item 4 is item 4 is indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. Any conflicts of interest? There being none, we move to item 5. Is there any transfer of agenda items? No transfer. Item 6, planning authority items, consideration of items with deputations. Can I have somebody move that, please? Thank you, Alderman Barakis. Any dissent? No dissent. So item 7, where the committee is acting as planning authority, and we go firstly to the supplementary item, sub item 11, which is 45 Elizabeth Street. So Glenn, if you could let Mr. Leonard and Fraser Reid and George Giamios in, please. Oh, and we have Lucy Burke-Smith, the heritage consultant, with us. Thank you. All right, have we got Mr. Leonard there? Oh, yes. Mr. Leonard, do you mind putting your camera on, if possible, please? Mr. Leonard, are you there? Oh, here we are. Okay, all right. Still can't see you. I wonder if your camera's, it's the reverse, the one on the rear camera or something. And you are on mute. Is there any help that you can provide, Glenn?
Unfortunately not, Deputy, with Brendan being external.
So just need you to perhaps turn on your microphone if you can, Mr. Leonard, at least. That's it. And we can't see you, but if the committee's okay, we'll just go ahead If you have 5 minutes to address the committee with your concerns, thank you. We can't actually hear you, so I'm not quite sure what we can do there. Looks like your bandwidth is low, so
Chair, if it does help, I think it's a problem that I've had a few times. Perhaps if Mr. Leonard, who's on Wi-Fi, turns the Wi-Fi off, I think it's a more stable connection over the mobile.
Dave, have you got any suggestions? Thanks, Alderman Barakis, for your suggestion. I think that usually works, doesn't it? But might be a matter of getting...
Chair, we are trying to contact Brendan.
All right, thank you. Committee, we have Ms. Burke-Smith for just until 5:30. So if we don't get Mr. Leonard back on, it may be worthwhile hearing from
I can't
her.
hear.
Oh, Mr. Leonard, I think you're back on now. So do you want to try presenting now?
Well, I can't actually. Can you hear me? Because I can't hear properly anything that's.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, but I wonder if it might be worth you hanging up and David trying to ring you, and we might hear from Ms. Burke-Smith in relation to the concerns. Oh, she's now available till after 5:30. So maybe we might go on to the next item, I think, and come back to this so that we can get that connection sorted properly. So if you'd like to hang up and
Okay.
we'll just go to the next item. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Lucy. All right, so we'll defer that and just go to supplementary item 13, which is 19 Allison Street. It's partial demolition and alterations, and committee did send this off for conciliation between the parties, but we have Ms. Slicer to address the committee again, as well as Ms. Alison Stops, who lives in Blackwood Avenue. So Glenn, could you let them in, please? So there's Ms. Stops and Ms. Slicer. So we'll start with you, Ms. Slicer. So you have 5 minutes, and I think if you can bring up the particular issues that might have arisen after conciliation. Thank you.
You're on mute, Mr. Slicer. Bottom left corner.
Yeah, just down in the bottom left.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, far away.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Yes, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak again on this matter, especially to those people that managed to visit and view the problem. 2 weeks ago, I didn't really focus much on overshadowing because I put privacy as my major concern. But that seems to have gone out of the window by an idea that no one can see into my garden spaces. So if I could have photo 4 put on the screen, please. Photo 4. It probably, no?
Glenn, have you got that? Ah, here we go. Yep.
Yeah.
You just keep talking. That's
Okay.
fine. We can...
Photo 4 just shows, no, that wasn't my photo 4, but never mind. That shows the height of the deck that will be directly across from my place at 4.4 meters above ground level. My photo that I thought I was showing showed my home, the western corner of which has a skillion roof which comes to 4 meters above ground. The deck would extend for 2 meters of a 3 meter room, with screening at that point at 1.7, and then just glass for the final 2 meters of the deck. I feel that I have 2 photos 2 and 3, which I would like to people to view, of the sun shining into my house from the west. And this sun is streaming in afternoons, 9 months of the year, when it's sunny, of course, into 2 living and 3 living rooms, really, kitchen, inner room, and my the back room. No, that again isn't mine. So this is I've sent, no, these are all Alison's pictures. Okay. It hasn't really worked, has it? I'm sorry. The height will be a problem because it's around 3 meters to my house wall. It will overshadow my house. That's one of the pictures, right? That's the light coming in my kitchen window. And the other picture, that's the first picture showing where, and that's the other room, the room that's shown in the yellow line at the bottom picture that says plate 5 is the height of the finished floor level of the proposed deck. The yellow line going up is 1.7 of a screen, and the yellow line going across my roof, it will go 2/3 of the way across that little room, is the height of the privacy screen, which I know will be shading the inside of my house. The final 2 meters of the deck will allow overlooking, as could be seen from the applicant's own photos of my property. And last week, I must say, I was prepared after much thought. By Friday, I was prepared to forego some of my privacy for a reduction in the size of the deck due to its enormous height. But I was a bit late. I had some technical problems with computers, and I was late and unable to get it to Karen Aby, and it was rejected as unacceptable anyway. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. So if you have you got some more points to make?
Well, just that, I feel that 0.5 meter of the depth doesn't do anything about the major problems of this sort of construction in that very, very tight area where we are living very close to each other, but trying to stay private and comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's about it. I'm just, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Yes. So are there any questions, Ms. Slicer? So, so the conditions that that the report suggests, you feel that they don't meet your concerns?
They don't, no. The
Mhm.
height is not, you know, it doesn't allow, it's overwhelming in its comparison to the houses around it, not to the house itself, but number 19, but it is to our properties, Alison's and mine in particular, because of the terrain that slopes. We will have just a sort of 5-meter structure, you know, outside our living spaces, and potentially making for less comfortable living.
I see. Okay. All right. There aren't any questions, so we'll go to you now. Thank you. So we'll go to you, Ms. Stops. So if you'd like to just take yourself off mute,
Okay.
and if you'd like to make the points, you couldn't join us last time. I think you had a bereavement. I'm sorry to hear. So if you'd like to make your points as well, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to raise my concerns this evening with the standard of the report to the committee with some examples. The Heritage Officer report states the proposed deck is similar in size and location to the existing structure. This is inaccurate, with the proposed deck being approximately 130% larger than the existing deck. That has since been revised down to approximately 120% larger than the existing deck. There are photos attached to the report taken at vantage points which minimise the degree of oversight and maximise the height of vegetation from the view. Could we please have plate 1?
Is it the other one? I think it might be the other one.
That's plate, I believe that's plate 5, which was shown in Nada's presentation. That's plate 4. The photos in the report to the committee, I'm sorry.
That's the 3 photos I have, sorry, under Alison.
Oh, I did forward the others. I don't know whether I did forward the others to David Banks. I'm sorry about that. I don't know if anyone has the report in front of them, but on page 8 there are 2 photos. One is taken from the corner of the existing deck, which overlooks 21 Allison Street. That photo,
yeah, I think it's page 532 of the report.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. That's fine. That's but we do have that.
Oh, thank you. So that photo is taken of 21 Allison Street, with which I share a boundary. That photo is taken 1.3 metres from the fence. The view, plate 2 is a view of my property from the existing deck at 19 Allison Street, and is taken, it looks to be about 2.5 to 3 metres from the boundary. And a more accurate representation of the oversight would have been portrayed by taking a photo from the same point, which was taken to illustrate the aspect of 21 Allison Street. The balustrade there, you can see, will come out further to 4 metres, and where there is a change of fence structure, that will, the screen measuring 4.4 metres high will be at that point. The other photo, which is on page 9 of the report that I printed, just shows the corner to which I refer and accurately illustrates the 1.3 metres. And the angle is shown to maximise the vegetation. And this vegetation on the boundary and the only tree in the garden are entirely deciduous. In my representation, I invited the planning officer to assess my concerns in context with a site visit. In visiting only the applicant's property and not visiting properties of the representors, I'm concerned that this is not an equitable process or assessment. There is also the inclusion of a plan with the sizes of the existing and proposed deck transposed, depicting a smaller extension to the current deck. I had made the planning officer aware of that. I consider the visual impact created by the white louvered aluminium screen at the elevation of 4.4 metres from ground level and 1.3 metres from the fence on my outdoor living area to be overwhelming. Plantings in pots have been suggested to alleviate that, but that does little to ease my concerns. Could please have the remain, there we are. So the pole, I don't know whether you can see that post, that is at 400 mil, 40 centimetres from the boundary with 21 Allison Street, and that is 1.3 metres from the existing deck. And the ground level is the same at the fence line. The blue masking tape is floor level.
30 seconds.
Thank you for those photos. The timber, I beg your pardon, with a floor level at 2.7 metres above the height of all existing deciduous mature boundary plantings, the deck with a clear glass balustrade will provide oversight into my entire garden space and living areas of my home. I'm a shift worker and cherish the space I've created to unwind and relax. The incremental creep of 5 earlier surrounding developments have impacted the privacy on my property significantly. I plan to retire in a couple of years and had hoped to enjoy my garden without further erosion of my privacy. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ms. Stops. Now, are there any questions from the committee? Any questions? I think some of us had a chance to have a look. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Deputy. I did visit the site. So to alleviate some of the concerns, you're suggesting, Alison, to reduce the size of the deck by another 0.5 of a metre. Is that correct?
That would certainly help, but preferably another metre.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And is there anything around the transparency of the deck that may be of benefit, like reducing the transparency?
Reducing the transparency of the glass across the front of the deck certainly would help, and reducing the impact of the 4.4 metre aluminium screening if that were constructed in a more opaque material, even similar to the front of the balustrade, would help to some extent, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Now we have the applicant, Mr. Little, here to address some of those concerns. Thank you, all of you, for being involved with the conciliation. I hope it was of some benefit. Mr. Little, you've heard some of the concerns that have been raised. How do you answer those?
Sure. Well, first of all, can you hear me? First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak again, and also for the timeline in which this has been done. We understand that from a couple of weeks ago, we did ask that it come through in the next couple of weeks, and it has. So thank you for that opportunity. We've also had a bit of a tragedy in our family. My mother-in-law passed away quite suddenly, and that has meant that we haven't had the opportunity to speak to anyone, any of you here. So you're sort of hearing from me only for the second time. And look, I really hope that doesn't count against us. A number of you have obviously been out to the neighbouring properties, and we're just hoping that the process and the facts and what's in front of you, you can make an informed decision, and we'll trust the committee to do that. So I just wanted to get that out first. In regards to the mediation. I thought it went quite well in regards to how it was done, but we weren't able to come to a conclusion. In regards to the screen on NADA's side, that was proposed originally at 1.3 metres, but we actually proposed in the mediation to take that up to 1.7 metres. So that was pre-approved by the council planner at 1.3, and he actually mentioned in dot point 6.86 on page 535 of the report and recommended that that was high enough. But in consultation, and when NADA actually said in the meeting that privacy was her focus, that we actually took that up to 1.7, and then to you, that was included in the memo from Karen, that we actually would like to keep that. And we think that that gives more screening to NADA's place and also to us. At the moment, there is no screening there at all. There is an ornamental grate, which is growing, which does offer some screening, but there's actually no screening there at all. So by putting this screening on, we're actually providing some privacy for us and for NADA as well, which we think helps to alleviate some of her concerns. If she's done a backflip on that and doesn't want the screening, then, you know, we can go back to glass on that side, but then that becomes a bit more of a privacy issue, and we would probably prefer to keep the screening at 1.7 and coming 2 metres out from the deck. The rest of the garden from plate 4 on page 532 in the photos, NADA has actually got her own deck screen up there, and then she's got quite thick vegetation down following on from that deck, and you cannot see anything from our deck into her garden. So the screening there is actually really good. In regards to the deck, which we've actually brought in, same thing, was out to 4.5 metres. We've reduced that in size to 4 metres, and that means that half of the deck will be screened on NADA's side and the other half is not. And I've actually done a chalk drawing out on our deck here and put the table where it would go, and you and put a screen up, and you cannot see, there's no way you can see the screen, see her window from where you would be sitting at a table. You would literally have to go right into the corner and look around to be able to try and see the side of her house. We've proposed that, and at extra cost to us, and to try and, you know, be friendly with the neighbours, we would like to put some greenery screening up on the back of the slats that we've proposed to try and conceal the deck a little bit and maybe try and create a nicer outlook. And we've also proposed the pot plants. Again, this is not in the planning scheme, we understand that, but as a gesture to put them in the corner to try and create a little bit more screening as well. I know I don't have a lot of time, so I'll keep moving on. In regards to the size of the deck, I said that we, you know, originally wanted the depth of 4.5, and we've brought that back into 4, and are happy to stick with that again to show the council, the committee, that we're actually willing to give a little bit on that. And also, I think it's just important to note that it's not actually a rectangle, that deck, that there's actually a trapezium shape when you actually walk and you step out the door. And that's actually set about 50 centimetres in. So the measurement of the deck is taken from the house, whereas where you would actually be able to put a table, and I went through this in mediation the other day, is actually 50 centimetres less. So whilst the deck is proposed at 4 metres, it's actually only 3.5 metres of space. Now, again, I've been out to our standard Bunnings outdoor setting with a width of 900 table and 2 seats, and actually sat down at it and measured it. And it's somewhere between 2.2 and 2.5 metres where you would actually sit regularly, normally at a table. And that leaves us with the 3.5 metre space, that only leaves 1.3 metres left over. So that's 65 centimetres at either end from where you walk directly out into a table, and at the other side where there's a glass balustrade. So 65 centimetres is literally only time to get around the deck, and that's it. The actual size of the deck has reduced from 27.4 metres squared to 25. So we're screening on Alison's side, because it's come back in, it actually only overlaps her property by 40 centimetres. So it was 90, it's actually only 40 centimetres. And if you look at plate 2, you can actually see, which is on page 530 of the report, it is thickly vegetated in that corner. Now, I know Alison may not agree with that, but there's quite a lot of vegetation. Plus the screen's going up. So at the moment, you can see from our kitchen out over to Alison's house, whereas if this screen was to go up, that would provide more screening from our house. And it was also, by putting the greenery screening on the back and then the pot plants there, that is a couple of extra pieces of information there. Just to summarise, and we think that that's hopefully addressed some of the concerns. We spoke before this process to 3 out of the 4 neighbours. I understand we didn't get to Alison, and that wasn't through lack of trying, and it's not her fault. We didn't get to her, so we were happy to go through the mediation process. We listened, and we've tried to come up with a reasonable solution that we think was really fair from a proposal that was pre-approved by the council planner, and then we've come in 2 weeks later to hear, and one of the neighbours has actually withdrawn her concerns completely. So she at 21 Allison Street doesn't have any issues. So it is these two, and we think that we've done enough to alleviate some of those concerns. Again, for us, it's a safety issue. It's moving in at the end of the year. I can guarantee you we're not a party family. We just want a space to enjoy the city. We can't change the boundaries of our inner city living, but what we can do is try and do our best to be amicable and put up some screening and some extra greenery to help with our neighbours. We think it's really reasonable, and we hope you do too. So thank you again for allowing me to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Little. We have questions from Councillor Dutta and then Alderman Briscoe.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Question that I have for you, Mr. Little, is it true that the current size is different to the one that is proposed by 120%?
Look, I would, without actually doing the numbers, what I can tell you at the moment, I did actually try and work that out really quickly before. Basically, at the moment, the balcony that's out there is 2 metres in length, 2 metres out, and the width of the house as well, which is 6.8. So when I say 2 metres out, we also, like I said before, there's that trapezium shape that's missing. So basically, what we want to do is go out 2 more metres from where it is, which will allow us enough space to put that table and chairs, which is why I tried to give you the dimensions out there. So look, it's certainly bigger, but at the moment it's just a balcony. So you can really only, there's not a lot of space out there at the moment. And it is an opportunity for us, and we would love to enjoy that space out there with our young family.
Thank you.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you. I know I'm having trouble with my audio. I hope it's better now, Chair. Mr. Little, thank you for your mediation session with the neighbours. I have visited 2 Blackwood Avenue, and I am sort of convinced that your new deck will look into the living areas and the backyard of that property. So when you look out from your new deck, not only will you looking in your own backyard, you could potentially be looking into the living areas of 2 Blackwood Avenue and the garden of 2 Blackwood Avenue. What's your comments about that?
Well, like I say, we reduced the size of the deck, which overlapped Allison's property by 90 centimetres back to 40. So it only just overlaps. And like I said, you can actually see from the kitchen out there at the moment. So it would actually increase the privacy when you're in the kitchen. It's just when you're out on, sure, if you're standing right up at the end of the deck and you're looking over into her property, then that's going to be there. But at the same time, this is what we want to avoid. This is why we want to put that screening up the side. We want to put some greenery screening on it. We want to, and I know that's not in the scheme, but we want to put some pot plants there to give Allison her privacy and give ours as well, because that's absolutely what we want. One, we want to be friendly with the neighbours. 2, we want to have some privacy for us and for them as well. So we absolutely will do everything that we can to make sure that we're not looking over into her property, and by putting that screening up, we think that satisfies some of those concerns.
Yeah, just a supplementary through you, Chair. Thank you for that. So the deck, the balustrade looking out to the back of your property, what will that look like? Will it look very similar to the current deck? And then is that where you're going to put the pot plants?
Yeah, so we're looking at the pot plants potentially right in the corner, so where the screening meets the balustrade, and that would be the point at which you would, if you could see into Allison's property, that's where it would be. And we can see in there now, like the screening that's going up is going to give more privacy, not less, in our opinion. And that's those pot plants. Yeah, we can put those up. It provides a bit more of a natural screening, and we think, like I said, that will help alleviate some concerns.
So you didn't answer. What's the material of the front? The balustrade.
Yeah. Sorry. It's glass balustrade out the front.
So clear glass.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Was there any vegetation removed before this application came along, Mr. Little?
Oh, I feel like that's a bit of a loaded question. Look,
I'm just asking a question.
Okay.
Mr. Little.
Look, in regards to the neighbours on either side, there was a beautiful birch tree on the side in front of Alison's house, and that died a few years ago. We absolutely loved it, so there's no way that we would have taken that out. So that was a number of years ago now. And then on the other side, down a little bit further, like deeper down into the garden, we've taken some smaller trees out. Absolutely, there was a big tree right in the corner, which is miles away from where we're looking at doing the deck, which fell over in a storm. So we've cleared out part of the garden down the bottom, no question, and lost one of our trees closer up. But I'm really keen to be able to get the lawn going, and we've actually reseeded the lawn at the moment, and that's with some fruit trees is sort of what we're looking to do in our garden. But in regards to losing vegetation, in regards to the next door neighbours, it was only that birch tree a few years ago now, and that died, unfortunately.
Sure. And just in relation, just following on from Alderman Briscoe's question around the glass or the transparency, is there any way that you can, because overlooking is the main issue that we're hearing from the neighbours, is there any way to reduce that transparency?
Look, we really would prefer to stick with the glass. We feel as though by putting the screening in on either side, initially when we sort of started to think about doing the deck, and this was 6 years ago when we initially got the house, but now that we're actually moving into it, this is when we're looking to do it. We've sort of love to have done glass all the way around, but when you actually sit there and think about that and think about the inner city living and the proximity to our neighbours, we thought that for us and for them that we're better off to have some screening. And certainly all the way down Alison's side with some pot plants in the corner, and then halfway down Nada's side with pot plants again, and just having the glass over the front. There's actually no windows on the eastern side of our kitchen and dining room, so the light that comes in is what comes directly in from the deck. So we really didn't want to close it off too much, and that outlook was from the light, and the outlook was what we wanted, and by straight across and looking straight out is the glass that we would like to keep. And we just hope that the screening and the vegetation is enough to satisfy the committee.
Thank you, and I'll pass on my condolences to you and your wife.
Thank you.
So I'll open the item for discussion. Alderman Barakis.
Well, thank you, Chair. Just to kick things off and to add my own little thoughts on this, I'll move that the officer's recommendations on this for approval. I think that this is something that, whilst this might not be a situation where everybody's happy, I think it is something that ultimately complies with the planning scheme. I think, having read the report a couple of times and previous when it came up to council or came up to committee earlier, this is something that I think is compliant. I think the screenings, as was said, I think might actually end up in a situation where there's more privacy protection for the neighbours as opposed to than what's currently there. So look, I think it'll be a sense where if we want to condition things, or we want to refuse this to bring it lower, or change the design of the balcony, I think we're actually going outside of what we should be doing, given that what we've got in front of us is something that does ultimately, in my view, pretty clearly comply with the planning scheme. So I won't go on too much about it, but I'll move this, and I think this is something that we should definitely approve. Can I just ask, will this go to council, or is this going to be approved today if it gets approved?
No, it's committee approved.
Right. Look, I'll leave it there, Chair. But I think this is something that we should be approving.
And just to be clear, you're taking it from the memo with the recommendations from the conciliation. Yep. Thank you. Okay. Further discussion. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. Look, it's a difficult situation because everyone has beautiful gardens, and the lay of the land. I've been to 2 properties now, or three properties surrounding the applicant's property. All very lucky people to live in such a beautiful inner city place with lovely gardens. I'd like to thank the applicant for accepting 0.5 metre off the front of his deck or their deck, and also screening. I still think they could do a little bit more. You can have glass that is frosted. So I was just wondering if I could ask a question of the applicant through you, Chair. I'm sorry about this, but I think your your question and my question prompted me to think a frosted glass, which would allow light onto the deck, but it also increase the privacy. I wonder if we could ask the applicant, I could ask the applicant that question, then I'll continue.
Go ahead, Mr. Little.
Sure. Look, interestingly, in the mediation, a frosted glass wasn't suggested by either of the neighbours as a potential solution. It was raised by Karen, and she was welcome to throw it up in the air. And then they sort of maybe at the end said, "Oh, that might be something that they could be interested in." And then again tonight, where it was raised again tonight, but not by the applicants. It's probably, like I sort of addressed before, it's not something that we were keen to do. And it's just off the front that we think that outlook for us and from our kitchen, an area that we would like to keep it as glass. And we're hoping that the screening, down the sides, which we've, the screening has increased on Nada's side, and we've brought the deck in 40 centimetre overlap on Allison's property. And, from an application that was approved by the planner to start with, and we think we've given a little bit more to help alleviate. We would like to keep that if possible.
Thank you.
Okay, I wonder if I could suggest, rather than a condition then, advice which just reflects what the applicant has told us at this planning meeting, that he would increase, or they would increase the vegetation as a part screen. So there would be advice that would add it onto the conditions of approval, that further vegetation be considered as outlined by the applicants. Can we? I don't know whether the mover of the motion could just accept that in.
I think it's part of the memo anyway, Alderman Briscoe, by the sounds of what Ms. Abey's telling me.
Yes,
all right. It is all right. So I was of the mind to move the deck in, or attempt to move the deck in 0.5 metres. But again, I think I have been convinced by the applicant that putting and it's one of those things that this planning committee has to do all the time, weigh out the concerns of the neighbours, which I think have been addressed in part, not fully, with the intentions of the applicant. So I won't do that. I was going to do it, but I'm not going to do it now. I do apologise if I've indicated to any of the representatives that I would do that. All I can say, I'm reasonably confident that the applicant will be a good neighbour, and if further vegetation, maybe even further plantings in the garden, may help also any potential overlooking by the neighbours. So I'll support the motion for approval, noting my concerns, but also noting the goodwill shown by the representatives and the applicant. Thank you.
Alderman Briscoe, I've just been advised that it really is only addressing 17 Allison Street, so you might want to add "and to Blackwood Avenue."
Yes, so I wonder if we could include that,
Alderman Baracus. If you're happy with that, Alderman Baracus.
So what are we including on exactly again?
It's an advice clause in relation to privacy.
Look, given that it's an advice clause, I'm happy to include that in.
Right, any further discussion? Just make the point, sorry, I think Councillor Dutta, you go first, and Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Having heard the arguments and the facts, I am of the view that the privacy can be deemed to be unreasonable, because that privacy is very, very important, is one that I make the judgment, and that is my opinion. And the other aspect of this is also the visual impact, looking at the site of the two poles with that white, whatever tarpaulin or it was there. That to me, again, indicates that is to be deemed to be unreasonable for me with the visual impact. So I will not be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Chair. I visited both neighbours over the weekend and had a good look at the situation. And I'm very sympathetic to the privacy of the neighbours. But I'm also conscious that we have a recommendation for approval. And reluctantly, I will support the recommendation for approval. I'll, in another, reiteration of the deck, maybe we could have come up with it's not our job to come up with another design, but a more complementary deck or something that stepped down or did something to alleviate the issues, but that's not what we've got. So reluctantly, I'll support the officer's recommendation tonight.
Thank you. And I also have reservations about. I mean, this is a deck, and it should be quite a straightforward thing. But there will be impacts on neighbours who spend quite a lot of time in their backyard, and it's quite a sanctuary for them. So it's a difficult situation. I think the conditions have helped, and I would like to think that it is not a situation where it's impossible to be spending time in the backyard, to be growing vegetables, and to be appreciating the space that the neighbours do love. So I will be supporting this application. I just find I would hope that all neighbours could live quite happily in this very close space, and be conscious of the needs of each other. So I'll go around the table. So Alderman Briscoe, how do you vote?
I'll support the motion for approval.
Councillor Harvey?
For.
Alderman Barakis?
In favour, Chair.
Councillor Dutta?
Against.
Councillor Coates?
For.
And I'll vote for as well. So that's carried 5 votes to 1. We now move back to the 45 Elizabeth Street. Now, do we have Mr. Leonard? Here we go. Right, Mr. Leonard, you're just connecting to audio. Right, we have you. So if you'd like to present your concerns to the committee, you have 5 minutes to address the committee, and then we'll ask questions if we have any. Thank you. And just go off mute before you start. Thank you. Left-hand corner. Bottom left-hand corner. There we go. Yes.
Okay. I'm very sorry about the technology problems. I think we got there in the end. I've just got, I think, 4 things to say. Kodak House has been identified and listed by the council as a heritage place in the planning scheme through a public process. And the name Kodak House on the parapet is especially important. That's been acknowledged. Now, rules apply to heritage places, as we know, and the council may exercise its discretion, but that's not unfettered. Discretion has to be exercised within the limits of achieving code objectives. So I think that's an important thing to remember. Look, I think the reuse of the building is good, and I think it can work. It doesn't actually require the demolition that is being proposed. There are alternatives, and I think that's the critical thing to remember. And look, finally, I guess, in addressing the committee, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, listen to your advisors, listen to your director, your manager, your planners, your heritage officers, and in this case, where the council has actually spent some of its hard-earned money getting independent heritage advice, listen to those advisors. And look, finally, I'm obviously happy to help work with the applicant and with the professionals to achieve a satisfactory outcome, because I think there is one that's possible. And I mean, ideally, we would have been looking probably at a conditional approval, but I understand that it's actually not possible to do that legally. So that's why we're sort of facing a refusal. But look, I think there's definitely a solution there, and I'm happy to be part of the team to find it.
Thanks, Mr. Leonard. I'll open it to the committee for questions. Are there any questions? Councillor Harvey, you've got your hand up. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. I hope my audio is a bit better. Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Obviously, your experience in these matters is of help to the committee. So you would say it would have been possible to give a conditional approval, which seems like a more satisfactory outcome than outright refusal. Can you suggest how they could get that the windows, the light into that upstairs part of the building without removing the sign?
Well, it's a matter of setting back some of, creating a space behind there. But I mean, the problem is the council has to deal with the application that's been submitted. Ideally, and this is what I actually put in my representation, would have been better to have actually withdrawn the application and come back with a, with a better solution. From a legal point of view, look, you really need to listen to, your legal advisors, I guess, because I gather that it's not possible, I don't think, to impose conditions which actually result in, a fundamental change to the application. But like from a common sense point of view, that's where you should be doing. But common sense and legality.
Architect, then,
work hand in.
as an architect, could you see a way of getting light into that top apartment without?
Yes, and I think the council's own consultant has said that as well. If you read the consultant report, I think it's actually concluded along the same lines. And look, that's basically, Alderman Briscoe, as I said, I'd be happy to sit down with the applicant and sort of work, and with others to work through that and come up with a solution.
Thank you.
Any further questions of Mr. Leonard? No further questions. I just have a question. So, I mean, the main issue is that front sign, and are there other examples around the city of this sort of 1920s type sign?
Yeah, there are a number of, if you wander around the streets of Hobart, you'll see a lot of the buildings do have their names, or they might have the date that they were constructed, or they might have, the original business name or something like that, particularly up in Elizabeth Street and Liverpool Street and so on. I guess Kodak itself, I mean, that sign itself has been there nearly 100 years. And I guess in a way, it's almost, synonymous with, the whole photographic industry during the 20th century. An industry that's changed dramatically in the last 20 years. We all take digital photographs now. Not many photographs actually get printed out. But in the 20th century, Kodak, and you think of the great social change that making cheap cameras available to everyone so that they could document their lives, document their children growing up, etc. I mean, Kodak, that building itself was a landmark and still is a landmark in Hobart. And I mean, I think it's just totally regrettable to actually to harm that building in the way that it's being proposed. It's so avoidable.
Thank you. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Chair. Look, just a question, I guess, and I'll be first to admit I'm a layman when it comes to heritage. But I mean, look, when I'm reading the report, and obviously, this is a very old building, and if you like, we've had. I mean, I'm sure some businesses would kill for this, but we've had the word Kodak in our city for the best part of 100 years, sitting above it. But I mean, when I read a report, and obviously Figure 16 shows it in 1937. Figure 17 doesn't have a date on it, but the key one for me is the Figure 18, where, as best I can tell, sure, we've had Kodak in our city for the best part of 100 years, but it has actually changed. I mean, it went from, clearly it was written in red paint back to a black paint. The whole building's been repainted in a slightly different color. In the 1937 one, at least on the photographic evidence, it was actually a much bigger sign writing. And look, when I went there today and looked at it, and when I'm reading through what's proposed, they're not proposing to get rid of Kodak. There still will be that word in space. And yes, it might be slightly changed, although they seem to think that we wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But I guess I'm struggling from a heritage point of view. I can see that, yes, it was there in 1976, but it actually looked very different. I'm just wondering your thoughts around that, because obviously it has changed over time.
Yeah.
Is it just one more change?
Yeah, look, I understand, like from, as you said, a layman's point of view and from a heritage point of view. What we're actually talking about, Alderman Coates, is the name of the building at the top of the building facing Elizabeth Street. It actually says Kodak House, and that hasn't actually changed since about 1925-26 when it was put up. I mean, the actual drawings for the proposal are actually in the archives. I've actually looked at them. They're still there, and it hasn't changed since 1925-26. And it's that front facade that I'm talking about. It's that part of the building. It's that sign as being part of the building. Now, you wouldn't go down to Hunter Street and look at the IXL building and take out the IXL name and put a hole in the wall there and put something different there. No one would even think of doing that. No one would go to St. Peter's in Rome and take off, the Latin lettering or the inscription at the top and put something modern there just because they thought it was a good idea. You wouldn't go to many of the buildings in Europe and do the same thing. So I guess what I'm saying is, why are we doing it here on a building that has actually already been listed? And in fact, the building, the sign, the name of the building is actually part of the listing. Why are we actually doing that? And yeah, you may be a layperson, but you're charged with administering the council's planning scheme. And
okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Any further questions, Councillor Coates?
I don't know. So I guess, I was just wanting to sort of get my head around, because I mean, to me at least, it looks like the building has changed its look over the years, and this would be one more slight change. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Data.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question with regards to an observation I'm making. When the demolition of that particular name is taken away, if it's going to be benefit, environmentally, socially, economically, would that not justify it? What's your thoughts on that?
There can be no benefit from doing that. And the simple thing, Councillor Data, is that there are alternatives to the demolition. The building can be reused, can be effectively reused. They can provide the accommodation that they want without the loss of heritage fabric, without the loss of heritage value. There is an alternative, and I would encourage, I guess, the applicant to see that. And as I said, I'm happy to work with council planners and with the applicant to achieve that. But if that, at the moment we have to do with the application that's before you, and I just think it would be, it's clearly, I mean, why did I go to the bother actually making a deputation? Because I actually think it's a really important issue. It's an issue of principle for a heritage building that's been listed, and an important part of the building is actually being removed.
All right, thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, I don't think, oh, Councillor Harvey, yes, and Alderman Briscoe putting their hands up.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Just one question. So it's only this sign that's the sticking point for you. The rest of the proposal you're fully supportive of?
Yes.
Thank you.
Alderman Briscoe?
Yes, my understanding, Brendan, is that the actual building, not a listed building, it doesn't require Heritage Council approval.
The building, I'm not, look, I don't know, I don't think it's listed by the Tasmanian Heritage Council. If it is, then it would require approval under the Heritage Act. What we're dealing with at the moment is just a planning approval under LUPA. The Heritage Council don't have any role in that, as far as I know. I don't know.
That's the point. You said this building is listed, and when you say it's listed, usually
When I say it's listed, it's actually listed as what's called a heritage place in the code of the planning scheme. I think it's E13 from memory. In the planning scheme,
right, okay. I think I've understood that.
A whole lot of codes. There's traffic, there's parking,
Okay, yep.
signs. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Councillor Dutta, did you have any other question, or your hand should be down? Okay.
Thank you.
I think that's all.
Another question, sorry.
Oh, you got another question? Okay.
Yeah, sorry about this. As Mr. Leonard has said, it is an important building. I'm looking at page 11 of a photograph, Mr. Leonard, of the, obviously taken in winter time when there's no leaves on the tree. I had difficulty seeing the sign when I was in Elizabeth Street. It may have been more obvious when it was built because there wouldn't have been trees because there's a mall there now, but you can't actually see the sign from directly in front of it. In fact, you've got to go back over the other side and you can see remnants of it through the leaves. Yeah. So does heritage does that make any difference to your opinion of if you can't see it, is it heritage?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the whole principle about if you can't see the tunnels under the city, if you can't see the powder magazine in Princess Park, does that diminish its heritage value? Of course not. If you can't see the basements in some of the old buildings, if you can't see the crypt of St Paul's Cathedral without actually going in it, does it actually mean it's not an important part of St Paul's Cathedral? Of course not.
All right, further questions? If not, we'll go now to the applicant. Thanks, Mr. Leonard.
Thank you.
Appreciate your deputation. So stay online, and you can hear the rest of the from the applicant. So yes, and if you just put yourself on mute, please.
Yep.
Thank you. And we have the applicant. We have Fraser Reid on behalf of. Is it Stefan and George Giamios?
With me here.
Okay, so you heard some of the argument put forth?
I did, thank you. Look, it's a difficult building. You've been through it. The condition is not great. The owners have struggled to work out what to do with the building, and they want to give this a go. The residential use, commercial uses haven't been viable. So they're looking at a future use for this site. The residential use, we think, is a good use for the site, although it's pretty constrained. We think it's a good use for the city, and to try and get some of these shop top spaces used for residential would be of great benefit, and be great if we had a lot more of it in the city. And I think the council would support that. So in terms of the reason around this facade, it really is that long, narrow space that the aldermen have experienced and councillors have experienced when they've been up through the space. And having a blank wall at the end of it is very compromising in terms of the amenity of that space and an outlook. So as you'll probably note from the section plans and the side elevation plans, there are two levels of two levels of accommodation in behind that Kodak facade, and that Kodak sign facade. So you'd actually be looking from the little courtyard space behind there. With this opening, you actually get to see up through that space, or from the mezzanine space further back in within that level, you get to have an outlook. It's all very well to say that there are other ways to configure this so you could make it habitable. That may be so, but I don't think it's habitable to the standard that would actually justify the investment and the difficulty to actually make it all happen. So that's really where the proponents are coming from. We are trying to, the Kodak identity of the building is important, and you can see through the design that we're trying to embrace that. But it does require some offset in terms of an impact on that facade of the Kodak house sign. And I think you all can understand that the proposal is to retain the Kodak lettering and that silhouette, the Kodak house lettering, but actually create that opening that provides the amenity and secures the benefits of the ongoing viable use of the building. I think that the issues that were discussed before about the visibility to this sign, I'd agree with Mr. Leonard to the extent that it's not irrelevant. It's not irrelevant whether you see it or not. But if you, I think as you move through that mall space, you can appreciate that your actually main views are to the flank walls. And then when you come through the space and you can see this Kodak house lettering on the facade, you are actually closer to the building and you are looking up. So we think that maintaining that Kodak house representation there, it's not the ultimate heritage outcome, but if you look at the heritage outcome in terms of the broader benefits of reusing this site and securing its future, we think it can be supported under the planning scheme, and the planning scheme clearly looks at those prudent and feasible alternatives. I know other alternatives are being suggested, but as experienced developers, George has done a lot of work, and he knows what's going to take to make this worthwhile and make it work. So really, at that point, I'd probably just hand it over to any questions you may have. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Fraser. Councillor Harvey, you've got your hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, look, yeah, I will ask a question to both, yeah, probably to Stefan. Would you consider having a conversation with Brendan about the alternatives to losing the sign?
No, I'm not really sure what Mr. Leonard's role is here. Like, he's a representative, isn't he? I'm not sure if he's still part of the council, but look, no, not really. It's just we've sort of worked through what we thought we could try to achieve the best outcome to.
Yep. All right. Well, and can you describe what's behind the sign? There's a deck on the top floor, and then is there a living area that'll be abutting the area behind the sign? I'm just looking at the plans, and I can see a deck in that location. So you'll be on the deck looking through the space?
Yeah, so it's like a living space below, and then a top floor bedroom above, which is open. So both rooms would benefit from the opening there.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So it's like a mezzanine bedroom above.
See it on section B of the drawings. I'm not sure. I don't know what page of your agenda that would be, but section B and section A.
So you've got a living space below, which is full height, so 2 stories worth. So you've got a grand sort of high ceiling, and then sort of set back is the bedroom above that would be open to all of that. If that
It's page 87 of the report, apparently.
Is that
Further questions, Councillor Harvey?
No, that'll do me. Thanks.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe?
So essentially you're saying the benefit of this building to be reused overrides the significance of the sign?
Well, I suppose we're saying that we think the sign is significant, but we're actually mitigating the impact on that by retaining the lettering, if you like. So we retaining the signage, it's just the impact of the facade around that sign, if you know what I mean. So, so it's a mitigated heritage impact that is part of the balancing of what it's going to take to get this site to be reused, and that, as you're aware, you know, there are performance criteria that deal with you know, greater benefits and things like that. So that is all very relevant to council's assessment.
Yes, I see some parallels that can we rename buildings? You're not suggesting it's being renamed. Like, for example, Tattersalls Aquatic Centre would have heritage value, I imagine, because it was the name Tattersalls, and now it's the Doon Kennedy Aquatic Centre with much more lettering. So you're not suggesting at all to get rid of the name, and it'll presumably be Kodak House Apartments or whatever as part of the
yes, it's very much seen as the, you know, like a real asset to the site to actually maintain that branding, that iconic branding for the site. But we do think it's necessary to have this impact, unfortunately, but do it in a way that is mitigated.
So just to follow up through you, Chair, the signs will reflect that 1920s feel about the sign. Will it have the same font?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We've even actually, it is even possible to model the actual letters completely and 3D print them to make them exact representations of the existing letters. So that has been discussed with the architect. And the other thing on the flank walls is to maintain that Kodak painting on the side walls as well, was the other proposal that you'd see in the elevation.
Yes, and while I've got you through you, Chair, whilst there might be some different possible design solutions, when I was on site today, I did ask, well, what about putting windows on one or either of the sides? And I think you suggested there might be problems about that from the neighbours. Would you like to elaborate there?
Not only that, Jeff, but we don't want the top apartment having a blank wall in front of it. It wouldn't be nice for people to live in. I think I wouldn't want to put my name to it. What we've done so far around town, all that, I think it's been worked out pretty well. You know, it's something that we can say, wow, it is a nice apartment, but we don't want an apartment with a wall in front of it.
Thank you for that. Alderman
Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. And this one's probably more for Fraser. Just in regards to, I think it's paragraph 6.9.4, which is talking about the heritage criteria. And I'll just read out a little section of it. The demolition must not result in the loss of significant fabric form items, outbuildings, landscape elements that contribute to the historic, cultural heritage significance of the place unless the following are satisfied. And A has got, you know, there are environmental, social, economic, safety reasons of greater value to the community than the historical, cultural heritage values. And then part B has that there's no prudent and feasible alternatives. And I suppose noting what you just answered in your questions to Alderman Briscoe, and I suppose specifically noting the words prudent and feasible, I'm assuming you guys, when you got the feedback from the heritage officers of council did look at other options. Are there any feasible options there as far as ways to you know get the problem resolved as far as this sign?
Well, we have looked at it, and I suppose when the issue arose, we sort of invited some suggestions from councillors to is there an alternative way to deal with that facade? But I think other than retaining it as is, no, there was no other suggestion that council could think of that could deal with that. And you heard George speak before that having an outlook for that that apartment is really important.
And just as a follow-up, obviously there's the issue of the amenity of that apartment, which is the main issue as to why you don't want to get rid of that wall. If this was to be something that we can't find a solution to, and we can't approve it without maintaining that piece of signage, that wall there, would that impact on whether or not this gets built, or whether or not the project goes ahead? Like, I suppose, would this impact on the feasibility of the full project? Yeah,
well, absolutely. Well, that's very clearly what George has said, that unless he can get some amenity for this upper level apartment, that is the key apartment in the mix. Unless you get that, the whole thing doesn't work, and it's a very difficult development to start with. Council will be aware that this is not irrelevant in terms of the George's and Stefan's dealings around the town, that they've actually got other new build proposals also approved, and they have to work out how they prioritise things. There's no doubt about this one. It's a bit of a headache of a site to deal with, but if they can get it to work, they're prepared to actually make it happen, which will secure the future of this site. If it gets too hard, which is like a compromise permit, it's actually not useful. So they'll just move on. That's how I've been advised.
Thank you. All right, so I don't think there are any other questions, no other hands up. So I'll ask it again, because I really like the application, but I find this very difficult to get over this stumbling block of the heritage issue with the sign. So you're saying that there's absolutely no alternative that you can come up with in relation to allowing light to come into that space, or the configuration, like the way that that upper floor is has light or some sort of aspect.
I think it could get light. but it can't get an outlook. That's the problem. And that long, narrow space that you've been in, it's a difficult one. Like, it's unusual. It's a very unusual setup with this very long, narrow space with no outlook. And we don't have a solution to it.
All right.
Also,
okay.
We wouldn't have gone this far at all as if we didn't talk to council, as I said earlier on today, and we had the planner there and we had the heritage officer there too, and we were in the understanding that it was okay, and we talked about the sign and all that, and we were in the understanding that that was going to work with what we had proposed with doing the sign up. It was going to be out of metal, it's going to be black, and it's going to be laser cut, exactly the same, and it will not look any different from down below. No, it's not the same sign, and that helps both situations, putting the building up and the sign is still there. But if I was told about the sign from the beginning, what I'm hearing now, I wouldn't have gone this far at all. I would have dropped it from the beginning.
Yeah, well, we'll make the heritage officer's notes available. I've spoken to Mr. Denoy about that, so that to committee members, so that they're aware of what exactly transpired there. Councillor Coates and Alderman Briscoe, do you have your hand up to ask another question?
No, to start debate, I think.
Okay, Councillor Coates.
Look, just a question, and look, don't. I'm not trying to be sort of facetious here, but I guess I like to always ask it. But we often see developers, if you like, trying to cut corners and do it as cheaply as possible. But just to play devil's advocate for a second, putting aside concerns about amenity of the building and wanting to increase outlook, if it was purely a matter of cost, I would imagine it would actually be cheaper just to leave it as is without putting in the window. Would that be correct?
Well, I wouldn't do the development then. I wouldn't do anything. Do you understand that right?
I think the question was, is it more expensive to actually put the opening in? And the answer is yes, but you think that's justified.
It sure is. No, it is.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll take your lead, Alderman Briscoe. And we do have Lucy Burke-Smith, who's the heritage consultant here. Thank you, Fraser and Stefan and George. I'll hand it over to you, Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. And look, it is a difficult one in a sense. I mean, we're essentially just debating a sign. And I know Mr. Leonard did mention some examples in Europe, and I've been to Florence where you see David out in the square, and it's not David at all. David's been moved into a big building. You see what you think are fantastic sculptures from the Renaissance. Oh, no, they're not there anymore. They're elsewhere. You see Rome, many iterations of Rome. In fact, they can't even put in a proper metro because they keep coming across former things of Rome. I think I'm very supportive of heritage. The applicant has said that they're not going to change the facade. The facade is the important thing. But if you look through the building, like I think all of the members of the planning committee did today, what a challenge, what a challenge. And if it works, then a whole heap of other buildings will be redeveloped. We know there's a lot of empty tops of shops that were originally all sorts of uses. To get one in the middle of the city like this, preserving the heritage facade, not having the original fabric for the sign doesn't worry me, because there's been many iterations of signs, including no one's worried, it doesn't seem Mr. Leonard or others are worried about the neon sign in the front. That will come down, but that seems to be represent an era of the history of that building. Or the painted signs on both sides, apparently they're going to stay. So I think if we have the sign in a different format, but essentially in the same place, it increases the amenity of that building. Well done to the applicant who's willing to take a huge risk and redevelop the building. Because I know for 20 odd years, and Alderman Zuko has been a major pusher here, trying to get developers interested in inner city buildings which are empty. In this case, I must admit I had quite a reaction to all the pigeon stuff around the place and pigeons flying around and broken bits of whatever. A derelict building except for the ground floor where there's a modern shop. So I will move a motion for approval. I know talking to the director, he has conditions for approval, and I welcome this one. It is, there might be a slight loss of fabric of a sign, but it will be there in another form. It will add to our city. We've always, and I imagine these apartments will be very attractive, but the history of the building is preserved, and the future of the building is preserved as well. So all I can say is there must be one way we can get around this in future, when this could be the catalyst for really significant reuse of our a lot of empty buildings in the city. And I think the price you have to pay is lose a fabric of a multinational organisation, which sadly I don't think exists. If it still exists, it's in a very minor form. Maybe Google will go that way, or Facebook in the future. Would we be fighting over whether Facebook should stay? So in this case, it doesn't worry me. It is a sign. That is all it is. It's not the fabric of the building in the sense of the quite significant heritage of the 1920s type building. And I think well done to the applicants who've come to us, attempting to do something which there's been a few iterations of this building, but this one to me is a perfect example of what we should be happening, reuse of our heritage buildings.
Thanks, Alderman Briscoe. So, Alderman Briscoe, I think, Glenn, if you could share the screen so that we have that, the conditions for approval, please. I don't think anybody else has had a chance to see those as yet. So, Glenn, if you could share that and have a chance to have a look at those. You will need to scroll down as well. Oh, sorry, this is Davey Street. You might want to put 40, we're still on 45 Elizabeth Street, Glenn. So if you could put those up, please. And Councillor Dutta, then Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. You know, it's my responsibility as a planning authority to look at the rules and the provisions under the planning scheme. And I am usually very supportive of anything that has to do with the heritage and the fabric. And for me, I have to put this whole application under 3 clauses. Clause 13.7.1p1 very clearly states that demolition must not result in the loss of significant fabric. And this is, as Mr. Leonard said, it's a very significant fabric. And I totally agree and support his point. However, the clause goes on to say, unless all the following are satisfied. And it is my view that there are environmental, social, economic, and safety reasons, which is far greater value to the community. And therefore, I believe that clause 13.7.1p1 is satisfied. I then look at clause E13.7.2.1, and there are P1, P2, P3, and P4, and they all comply and they are satisfied. And then I look at the third clause, which I think is relevant, is clause 17.7.2p1, and there are A to I provisions. And the provisions, as far as I am concerned, again, it is my discretion and a discretionary judgment that it is deemed to satisfy them all. And therefore, I would be supporting Alderman Jeff Briscoe's motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I had a look through the building today, and I've been staring at the designs and looking at the sign. And for a number of years, I think all of us on council have talked about how we need to activate the inner city, and that we need to get the shop tops restored, renovated, and occupied. And this is an opportunity to do another building where we can come up with or the developer can come up with a good solution to activate and to reuse and to restore a dilapidated building that's been vacant for quite a while. So I'm supportive of the motion for approval. It's unfortunate that we lose that sign. However, there's a solution there with a replacement sign, but that also improves the amenity of that top apartment or top 2 apartments. So I'm comfortable with not agreeing with the officer's recommendation for refusal, and I'm comfortable with agreeing that we should let this development go forward. I'd hate to miss out on this development, and I don't know whether that's an ambit claim or not, but I'm confident that this is a good decision to approve this development, and that this will add a lot of value to the city of Hobart, and especially to that part of the mall there, to have more people living in the city. So yeah, I'm very supportive of this development. So sorry, Mr. Lennon, but you know, sadly, that sign will be changed into another incarnation. You know, it'll be a similar sign. Things have changed with regard to signage on the building, as you can see. So I don't think this is should be the game stopper here. So I'll be supporting the recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Dutta for making the points, because I was about to pretty much raise the exact same point. I think the particularly clause 13.7.1p1 that I raised when questioning Mr. Fraser-Reid. I think it's particularly important to note Part B, and when we're looking at alternatives as to whether or not a piece of heritage can be maintained during a development, I think the words prudent and feasible particularly relevant, because just because something can be done doesn't mean it's feasible to do it. In regards to this, I think it may have even been Councillor Coates on a previous item, I think said the words that, you know, the best way to maintain heritage is to use it. And I think anyone that's seen what's currently there, I think would see that that's probably the case, and that just because it's been untouched doesn't mean that the heritage is being well maintained. And the best way to maintain what is, as Mr. Leonard said, an important building is to have it in a setting and in a configuration to make the renders it usable. I think especially whilst the visibility of the heritage, I think, as was mentioned, might not necessarily be a key factor as to the significance of it. I think the fact that we're looking at something that isn't hugely visible, especially from up close, I think we're not talking about necessarily destroying something. We're talking about altering it to make it usable. And this is a building that has been has changed in colour and in sort of configurations over time, somewhat, you know, however slightly. But if the alteration of this sign up the top that isn't particularly visible means, you know, a greater preservation of the broader heritage aspects of the building, I think it might even be in the benefit of the broader heritage building itself. Not to mention the social economic aspects of it as well. I think, you know, whilst it's not necessarily a planning item or planning consideration in and of itself, I think, as Alderman Briscoe said and Councillor Harvey said, this is a sort of proof of concept, I think, for us better utilising all those top of shop areas in the city that are currently well underutilised. And I think we should be, you know, not supporting it for that reason, but I think we should be looking to this as potentially a sign of good things to come for other sites. I think this is something that I'm happy to support Alderman Briscoe on. And I'm hoping this is something that can be approved, because I think it is a case where we can appropriately maintain what is genuinely an important building in our CBD, but also maintain it in a way that lets it be used and lets it be an even more active part of the city. So look, I'm happy to approve this, and I hope it does get up.
Thanks, Alderman Barakis. Now, there's a few hands up, but I think everybody might have asked their questions. But I'll just ask Ms. Burke-Smith a few questions, if I might. Now that we have you here and you've been waiting patiently, I think it's only prudent and proper to ask you a few questions. Could you just describe your concerns that you've raised? And I also would like to just find out what you have to say about the inundation and potential floods and well, I don't know if that's your area, but whether that has any impact on this building as well.
Chair, I might limit my comments to matters of heritage, if that's okay. There may be other representatives of council who can better speak to matters of inundation. I think in response to your question, I might jump out to the significance of the place. If we undertake a high level comparative analysis of Kodak House in a national context, it's important to note that it's one of only 2 remaining Kodak houses in the country. There used to be Kodak houses in many, if not all, of the capital cities of Australia. And in some instances, there were multiple iterations of Kodak houses in one location. So there is a Kodak house remaining in Melbourne. However, it doesn't retain any of its associated business signage at this point. And so in that regard, Kodak House on Elizabeth Street in Hobart is a rare surviving example of, I guess, a corporate commitment to architectural excellence in the city, which also formed part of, I guess, their branding and marketing strategy. So the signage to the Elizabeth Street facade at the 5th floor dates from 1926, so that's a few years after the construction of the building. And it's my position that that signage does make a direct contribution to the architectural values of the building itself. The streetscape contribution of the building is noted within the data sheet for the heritage place within the scheme. And further to that, I think it's important to note that the painted signage, as is evidenced by the historic photographs within Appendix 8, show, I guess, an evolution and a progression of the Kodak marketing and branding approach as it's evolved over time since as early as we've seen in 1937. And I guess that remains of significance to Hobartians and to visitors to Hobart because I think of some of the points that Mr. Leonard mentioned about the evolution and I guess technological demise of Kodak as a result, and associations that everybody has on a personal level with photography. So the building does make a direct contribution to the character of the Elizabeth Street Mall, and the building is noted for its landmark qualities. And I feel that the signage to the Elizabeth Street elevation and that to the party walls is a direct contribution to those things. I guess the biggest challenge in assessing the proposal was the criteria, performance criteria under E13.7.1. And as Councillor Dutta has noted, there are a range of points underneath that talk about economic, social, environmental benefits. But that performance criteria also states that it's unless all of the following are satisfied. And so in undertaking my assessment, I wasn't sufficiently persuaded that there weren't economically feasible alternatives that could generate what is a very important adaptive reuse and continuation of occupation of this heritage place. And in that regard, I think it's important to state that I'm supportive of the proposed use and very supportive of investments that see these places being continued for that use. But that was the sticking point for me, in that as an architect, I could see that there were potentially other feasible alternatives which hadn't been discussed or outlined within the proposal by way of, I guess, a feasibility or an options analysis that substantiated sufficiently in my mind that there were no prudent feasible alternatives.
And was there a conservation management plan as part of the application?
There wasn't a conservation management plan per se. There was, as I understand it, there are a few assessments of significance that historically survive, but not a conservation management plan in the full sense and definition.
Sorry, and would you expect that for this kind of application?
That would depend. I guess it would depend on the presence of a conservation management plan can be used as a management document, but also to, I guess, forecast and provide a policy framework for proposals for development and change. But it isn't always necessary, in my mind at least, to have a conservation management plan to guide such proposals.
And finally, just in relation to the proposed signage, like replacement signage, is that like a mimicry, or how would you describe that from a heritage perspective?
So there are a couple of things to consider with the proposed alternate signage. The proposal to reinstate painted signage in the party walls following the opening does not form part of the existing application. It's been put forward as some additional information outside of that, and so that doesn't form part of the proposal as it stands at this point in time. I think to answer your question, Chair, about the proposal, yes, it is would constitute mimicry, and albeit that it can be done in a way that has a high level of accuracy with regard to the signage, it isn't, in my mind, considered to be a sufficient alternative to what would otherwise be the demolition of significant fabric.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have Alderman Briscoe's motion for approval, subject to conditions, and I believe that element about the painted signs is part of the condition. Not that we can actually read them all. Perhaps if you scrolled out a bit, Glenn, it's going to be a little bit difficult, and it would be good in a sense to have seen this, but this will go before council. To my mind, I see it as a fantastic application and appreciate the work that's been that's gone into this, but I do have reservations, and we've heard from two heritage experts, and Mr. Leonard is a public citizen now, but he does have a wealth of information, and we've heard from Ms. Burke-Smith as well. So I find, whilst I love what you're intending, I think that the heritage elements are something that really need to be considered. So we'll go around the room. Alderman Briscoe, how do you support? Yep. Thank you, Councillor Harvey.
Support.
Alderman Barakis.
Support.
Councillor Dutta.
Support the motion.
Councillor Coates.
I'm in favour.
And I'll vote against it. So this will go to full council on Monday. So thank you. Now, committee, are you happy to press on because we have representatives for sub-item 1263 Davey Street. So are you happy to continue on to hear this? Okay, and we might break after that for 5 minutes or so. So, Glenn, could you let in Mr. Kaur, Mr. Fogel, and the applicant, Mr. Teleros, with Catherine Williams, Neil McIntosh, and Irene Duckett, please? And Alderman Barakis and Alderman Coates, could you put your hands down, please? Thanks. All right, Mr. Kaur, thanks for hanging on the line there. So if you have 5 minutes, and well, actually before we start, because there's been changes to this and in some ways somewhat subtle, perhaps if we could have the architect just advise us as to what changes there have been before we hear from the deputations. Ms. Williams.
Hello, can you see us all?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak. So in the last week and a little, we have managed to come to a point where we've been able to bring the building down to below 30 metres or at 30 metres. This has reduced approximately 6 metres off the overall building height and brought it within the acceptable solution. It's brought the number of apartments down. The top floor is now an entire penthouse, I guess, whereas before it was more of a half a level step up. Predominantly the podium and all the other floors leading up to those top couple of floors have remained unchanged. So the scheme is certainly sitting lower now. It's within all of the planning, the overall planning acceptable solutions, and we understand that we've met all of those requirements. And we're, I guess, really been negotiating and working hard to try and take on board the commentary that we've been receiving through this process with council. So that's about it. The other thing that I think has also been submitted or sent around to the Alderman is Bryce Rayworth's additional memorandum of heritage advice, getting a secondary opinion that can kind of sit beside, or having another voice, I guess, in the room of the heritage conversation about streetscape versus a townscape kind of picture as well. So that's the other thing I think that's important to bring to light in this stage.
Okay, all right, thank you. Now, perhaps, Choi, could you do a flyover, please, of the building? Before we with the new plans, can you do that, Choi?
Yes, Chair. I just need to be able to share the screen. Thank you, Glenn. Okay, so I'll just quickly turn on and off the previous application and this application. So before and after. And I'll go to street. And I'll go back up the street and then looking back into the city.
Committee, just sing out if there's any views that you want to see.
Chair, I'm happy with the views that are being shown. Can we just, as we go into different views, toggle the...
Sorry, so which view would you like to have a look?
I'll just as you're going around, can we just sort of toggle the before and after so we can see the...
Oh, okay, I see. Certainly, I will. I'll stop here and I'll go before and after. It's going back slightly. And I'll go back down to St. David's Park. And so go. And I go on to Macquarie Street now. And on Macquarie Street looking back. So show you a bit more.
Okay, thanks, Choi. I think
Okay.
that's probably enough. Committee, is it?
All right.
Not? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Now I open the floor to Mr. Kaur. So you have 5 minutes to address some of those issues, and hopefully that provides a bit more detail for you.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. We draw your attention to the minutes of the City's Urban Design Advisory Panel's meeting on the 27th of August this year. The expert panel highlighted a number of issues, stating, and I quote, that these can only be mitigated with a further very significant reduction in height. The revised plans do not provide a very significant reduction in height. And this is indicated by your own officer's report to you, page 176, paragraph 2, and I quote from them. Legal advice has been provided that the changes as proposed by the revised plans would not be substantially different from the original proposal. On page 175, the last paragraph of your officer's report states, and I quote, the Senior Cultural Heritage Officer has indicated that the revised plans do not sufficiently address the reasons for refusal which are provided in the planning report, and on that basis, the recommendation for refusal remains. On page 176, the reasons to refuse number 2 and 3 refer to clauses E13.8.2 P1 and 24.4.1 P5 of your planning scheme. These same clauses were 2 of the 3 reasons that the Resource Management and Planning Tribunal, RMPAT, supported Council's decision to refuse the Welcome Stranger development. That's just a few meters away. The RMPAT decision in January this year concluded the tribunal having determined non-compliance with those 2 clauses that they've not been upheld. Consequently, the appeal is dismissed. With the Welcome Stranger as the precedent, it's highly likely that in the event of an appeal, RMPAT would support the officer's recommendations to refuse. Now, this high-rise development would damage view lines and streetscape, result in detriment to the historic cultural heritage significance of the precinct through its design and siting, and would unreasonably dominate and have a materially adverse impact on adjacent existing buildings of cultural heritage significance through its height and bulk. And that statement goes right back to those two clauses. And I think we speak on behalf of 14,000 City of Hobart electors. That's 88% who voted in the poll of electors. We ask you to say no to this totally inappropriate high-rise development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaur. Are there any questions of Mr. Kaur? So in essence, nothing has changed despite a reduction by 6 metres, Mr. Kaur?
No, I'm just quoting your own planning officers and the Urban Design Advisory Panel when they said a very significant reduction in height. Your officers have stated that it's not that, because if it was that, it would require to be another DA. And also they're saying that what's been put in now does not change their mind.
Councillor Dutta?
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. Would you agree that when we are making this decision, it is based on the performance criteria or the acceptable solution and not based on the number of people or number of members you have?
Oh, I totally agree.
Thank you.
Alderman Barakis?
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Just in regards to the issue of precedence. Oh, actually, sorry. Before I get to that, the quote that you had about there needing to be a significant change to the
very significant.
Yeah, was that who was that again that said that?
The city's own Urban Design Advisory Panel.
Right. Okay, but not a council officer. We're talking about the advisory panel.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And just on the issue of the precedents supposedly set by the Welcome Stranger development, would you not? Well, I could put to you. Would you not think that there is a difference between something that sits on the corner of the block that has the main massing going effectively straight up, as opposed to one where the frontage is only a couple of stories tall and the main bulk is actually set in the inside of the block and isn't quite as dramatically in your face on the streetscape as what was being proposed in the Welcome Stranger? I would think that they were two different developments. So I'd just like your thoughts on that, as far as how they impact on the street frontage.
I think that, yes, they are two different developments, but this one, and if you look at those 3D drawings we've just looked at, they have the same effect as the Welcome Stranger one. And I think your officers say it, the heritage officer, and Choi with his 3D drawings clearly show the same thing, how dominating and domineering this is and how it will then affect the heritage buildings in the adjoining heritage buildings.
Further questions? No. Okay, thanks, Mr. Kaur. We'll move now to Mr. Fogel. And again, you have 5 minutes, and if you could raise issues that are really looking at these specific changes.
Yeah, I want to briefly address the changes basically in a sense from what I had made the deputation last time, that was mainly in regard of traffic. There has been absolutely no change basically in this new proposal or revised proposal. The number of parking spaces, the mode, how traffic is entering, exiting the development, and how it's going to impact on Davey Street is still absolutely the same than it was, and is detrimental to the overall traffic pattern on Davey Street and increasing congestion throughout the day, mainly especially during the rush hour traffic. In regard of bulk and height, again, to address Mr. Barakis briefly, the development at the corner and this one is basically very similar in regard of bulk and height, and from that perspective, in a way, the impact on the heritage is also the same, and there has been no significant reduction in height. If the developer would come down at least 3-4 stories basically in the height, that could be potentially, but then again, that needs to be a new DA. That's all what I have to say.
Good, thanks for your brevity. Okay, we'll open it to questions. Are there any questions of Mr. Fogel? No questions? I think you've made your point, so thank you. And now we will throw it back to you, Ms. Williams and Ms. Duckett. So if you'd like to address some of those issues that have been raised, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're probably not a lot.
Just lost you. I'm sorry. Just want to try again.
The height of the building has been reduced to comply with the acceptable solution that the planning scheme specifies. So in our view, the height is not an arbitrary thing that everyone sort of wishes for. It is specified in terms of what the scheme would like to see. In relation to heritage, we've got a very considered review now of the impact of the building towards the heritage precinct and the manner in which it addresses that. So that's come as an independent outside review, which has been very favourable of the building. I would refute the points that have been raised both by Mr. Vogel and Mr. Call that there is precedence from the Welcome Stranger application. There certainly is no precedent in tribunal decisions. Each application is dealt with under its own merits, and there are a number of very significant differences between that application and this one.
John, would you like to add in anything?
I'd just like to probably stress that the Welcome Stranger was at 45 metres height, and our proposal has been now reduced down to the 30 metre mark. Just wanted to make that clear, what the comparison is.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. I'll open it to the committee for questions. Are there any questions of the applicant? Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Chair. Look, just a question. Obviously, last time we heard in regards to some neighbours, I think it was a physiotherapy and a hearing clinic. I was just wondering if you've had any opportunity as yet, and look, I appreciate that this one will go to full council, but if you had any opportunity as yet to engage with them.
Yes, we have. I've sent out an email. We have a meeting on site actually tomorrow. So we're looking forward to sitting down with the neighbours and going over their concerns. And
okay, no, thanks. Really good to hear that. So thank you for reaching out to us.
Yes, thanks for raising that, Councillor Coates. Any further questions? Ms. Duckett, could you just describe those, you're talking about a heritage consultant. Have we got that information?
I understand it was circulated. It wasn't submitted with the amended plans because it only came in today. But I understand that it was circulated to the Alderman. If it hasn't been circulated to everyone, I'm very happy to provide it before next week. It's probably a bit of a rush to send it through now.
It's been emailed.
Yeah.
So I sent it to, well, today at 3 o'clock. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, okay, I now see it, John. I haven't had a chance to look at it, so.
Yeah, apologies, it came in.
It's quite brief. You can go straight to the conclusion if you want to. You've got to know the answer.
All right, and perhaps
well,
it
we can
might.
just read the best bit.
Well, we'll make sure that the officers have this information as well, because it helps them to guide us.
Yeah, and apologies, we were chasing up. We're trying to get it sooner, but it was only available this afternoon. So apologies for that.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, I'll open the item for discussion. Thank you. Councillor Dutta?
Yeah, for the sake of debate, I would move to accept the recommendation of the staff.
From the memo, or as it was.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Do you want to address this?
I will do so later. Thank you.
Alderman Brackus.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I am appreciating what Councillor Dutter's moved. I'll foreshadow. I believe that there was conditions. I think we saw them accidentally just a bit earlier. The conditions for approval. So I'd foreshadow that. I think ultimately it needs to be said. I know there was talks that this is a slight change to what we had previously before us. I think it needs to be reiterated that this is something that previously was above the acceptable solutions for height and is now within the acceptable solutions for height. And I believe it's within the building envelope. So I think that needs to be noted. It's not an insignificant change for us to go from outside the acceptable solutions to inside it. I think especially when we saw that flyover from Choi, especially from the different positions around the city, I think there is a pretty significant difference between what's being proposed now and what we had before us a couple of weeks ago. And as well as that, I think when we did see the sort of further back view of the city with the development, we do see what's a pretty clear transition from the buildings on Sandy Bar Road up to the buildings on Macquarie Street and into the city. I don't think that this is something that unreasonably sticks out in the streetscape at all. And then on top of that, I think we also have to consider the social, economic, and benefits that this development would provide to the city. So look, ultimately, I don't see enough reasons for us to be refusing this. I think that the applicants have done what they need to do, and I think the only way for us to, from what I gather, to get anything approved on such sites and any sites within this block wouldn't even approach what's in the ballpark of being economically feasible. So I think we do need to appreciate that fact as well. And I think especially if we can have developments that do adhere to, or do sort of have that transition from one side to the other. We do also need to appreciate that there is the issue of what's prudent, what's feasible, and how can we get things built within the city without unreasonably overshadowing or unreasonably dominating heritage. But it can't be a case where nothing can be feasibly done, because if we say nothing above 2 stories can be built there, then these blocks will go largely untouched for years to come. So look, I think that that does need to be a serious consideration, and I think that we do have in front of us an underutilized block, a block that is going to be built to contribute to housing, which is a relevant consideration. And I think one that for all other measures of the planning scheme tick all the boxes, and we hear effectively debating purely the heritage aspect of it. So I don't think this is something that unreasonably falls outside of that. I think that this is something that plays that balance quite reasonably, and I think it's something that should be approved. So I'd be foreshadowing a motion to approve with conditions, and we'll see where the debate goes from there.
Thank you. Councillor Coates.
Look, thank you, Chair. I'll try not to go over ground that's been covered before, because I think members are very good at summarising points on every side. And look, like with many applications, multifaceted. I mean, we all know, but there's still a demand for housing in Hobart, because we're seeing developments like this come forward, and no doubt they do bring benefits to the city. But look, from my point of view, I guess it's the question is always what can and can't be built on a site, and then you always try and look at are they just trying to get away with what they can to make a quick buck, or are they actually looking to contribute and do the right thing? And it did please me a lot to hear from the applicants that they have actually reached out to the neighbours. Clearly, they've come back with a revised design and taken on board the feedback in regards to the height. I mean, I said last time, but to me, the defining thing, you could sit dead in front of this building and look up, and in the background, all you then see is the existing IBIS or a Commonwealth building. Across the road, there's buildings of significant height and scale as well. And so, from my point of view, from natural justice, ultimately the block is zoned in a city. You are allowed to build buildings of this height on that area. We do have a very strong zoning system in the city of Hobart, But what that means is if you are blocks that are in the inner city, you are allowed to build buildings of this type, and our job ultimately is to weigh that up against, you know, other considerations. You know, the existing site at the moment, they're not proposing to demolish a heritage listed building, and I think they haven't tried to be as big and blocky as they probably may have possibly been able to do, and they have obviously got that setback from the street frontage, and they have, you know, as best I can see, tried to make something that actually fits in with a street. But you know, frankly, I don't see how other buildings around can be built that are in a lot of ways taller and bigger, and yet we can knock this one back. We do know there's a need for stuff like this in the city, and ultimately this block allows them to do so. And I frankly fear that if we do knock it back, we'll just end up wasting ratepayers' money and lose the appeal. And look, I you know, but it does give me a huge amount of comfort, and hopefully it gives other members comfort, that it would appear that they're taking on the messages. They've obviously lowered the height. They've reached out to the neighbours, and I genuinely think they're trying to do a good thing here. You know, and frankly, at the moment, just having an open air car park and a you know, a squat red brick building is clearly not going to be feasible going forward for what is really one of the inner city sites in Hobart, but a few and far between. So look, I will probably support the, as mentioned, the foreshadowed motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think we're looking at the intentions of the developer. We're looking at how it stacks up against the planning scheme. We do note that there has been a removal of a condition that it exceeds the acceptable solution for height. I still don't think, as the report has indicated, that it has not met the acceptable solution with respect to a positive contribution to the streetscape. And also the other two conditions, it does not meet the acceptable solution for the Historic Heritage Code, and it does not meet the acceptable solution or the performance criteria for the Historic Heritage Code, because the proposed building is unreasonably dominated in a materially adverse impact on adjacent buildings of cultural heritage significance through its height. So whilst you can say it meets the acceptable solution for height, but there are other parts of the planning scheme that it doesn't. It is sad that a development could happen here that does respect its heritage neighbours. This is a very significant street with heritage. And with other developments we've recently knocked back, including Welcome Stranger Inn, which was upheld by the Planning Tribunal, I think we should be sending a signal here that there is important streetscape heritage concerns, that these developments may fit in with other parts of the city, but not here. So while Councillor Coates says, well, it's a good development, well, it may be a good development in other parts of the city, and maybe developers should be looking at places in Argyle Street, where I'm sure that you'd get a lot of support from councillors and the planning scheme for more development to happen there. But here, where we've got historic St David's Park, we've got all the brilliant, significant streetscape that haven't been changed in a couple of 100 years, or nearly 150 or 60 years. I think we've got to be really, really careful. This is not a sign that can be replaced, or this is a significant, bulky building. And I agree with the officers that I'll be supporting the motion that's been moved by my good learned colleague, Councillor Dutta.
Thanks, Alderman Briscoe. Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. I want to begin by making a few observations. Firstly, it is my understanding that originally this building started at 45 meters. That was the thinking, and I stand to be corrected. And then it came to us a few weeks ago at 35 meters, and now they have come down to 30. Now, I think, I want to say it's a commendable thing that the applicant has moved along those lines. That's the first observation I make. The other observation is that the responsibility we have as members of this committee is not based on natural justice, nor is it based on the number of people who are opposing it. There's more than 380 plus. it is my responsibility, and I endorse strongly the points and comments made by Alderman Briscoe, that when I put this application under the planning scheme, there are 3 clauses, and I support the staff in this, that there is really no positive contribution, and I don't want to go on to that, but when you look at it in the context of the positive contribution as far as the streetscape and the townscape is concerned, with regards to the height, I think that it lacks and it doesn't provide, it does not satisfy that. Secondly, the other provision that is quite clear to me again, that it is detrimental to the historic cultural heritage, which is significant to the precedent. And then thirdly, again, it fails to comply or satisfy clause 22.4.1a because it unreasonably dominates it. So therefore, I'm quite comfortable to go along with the recommendation that the staff has made. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll support the original or the recommendation before us as well for refusal. I think I was the only one who voted at council not to defer this item. I don't think we've had a successful outcome with this deferral, I'm afraid, as much as the applicant may have tried. So I think these comments that have already been made by Alderman Briscoe and Councillor Dutta in particular stand for me as well. So I'll go around the room. So the motion is for refusal as before. Alderman Briscoe, how do you vote?
I support the refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Support.
Alderman Barakis?
Against.
Councillor Dutta?
Support.
Councillor Coates?
Not in favour, Chair.
And I'll support it. So, David, that is 4 votes to 2, I take it, for refusal?
That's correct, Chair.
Chair, somehow we've lost your video.
Ah.
No.
No, I'm still there.
No, have you got inside in that little panel? You can click
I thought you'd gone as well. Okay, so that will go to full council next Monday. Look, I think if we can adjourn for 5 minutes, if you're happy to do that, and we'll be back just for a pit stop. Thank you. Punctual, Jeff. Well done.
I still can't see you.
Oh, really? I'm here. Maybe I'm on the next page or something.
I think that might just be your internet, Jeff, because I can see everyone fine.
I can see you and Mr. Noy and myself. No, I think there's something strange happening here. But if I can hear you, Helen, that's all I need.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think we've got everybody here except, oh yeah, Bill's there as well, and Mike. Okay, so we'll resume at 7.1.1. Is that right, David? Dave?
Yes, it is. We have sub 14 as well too, Chair.
Okay, so 8 de Grave Street, South Hobart. It's the reserve partial demolition and alterations. Have somebody move that, please. Thank you, Councillor Dutta. Any discussion? No discussion. Is there any dissent to the approval subject to conditions? So that's carried unanimously. 7.1.2 is 342 Argyle Street, North Hobart, extension to operating hours. And we have a motion. This is what was the El Ali shop. It's now Yum Box. I'll open the item for discussion. Alderman Barakis, do you want to move that?
I'll move that, Chair. I don't think there's too much to say here. I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
So I think the issue for the one of the representatives was a lot of the fumes, and she sent me a photo of the side of the building, and I think she's also spoken to one of the environmental health officers just in relation to extraction of that. So is there any way that we condition we can condition so that that extraction is higher rather than onto the street? Mr. Noy?
Yeah, look, that is something that we could deal with under the Environmental Management Pollution Control Act. This is simply change of operating hours. I think this issue is an ongoing matter, and maybe if I could seek some advice from our Manager of Environmental Health on that matter. I'm just looking, is this delegated to committee? Yeah. Ms. Aby's just pointed out that we have got a condition there about no environmental harm, but I think, you know, this requires a little bit more investigation on the part of our environmental health officers.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously it's for are you taking a photo, Alderman Briscoe, of the invisible chair?
Just to improve I can see everyone else but you. Sorry.
Okay, so obviously it's open for, this is opening hours from 11 till 8, and that's reduced from the application to from 11 till 9, but it's that's Sunday as well. And yes. I think I can quite understand if there are, I mean, the representation did describe some of the behaviour that was of concern. We can't necessarily condition for that, but if we can have your word, Mr. Noy, that this will be followed up in relation to those issues of proper ventilation or exhaust fan use, that would be good. Yeah. Okay, so Alderman Briscoe Alderman Barakis has moved that. Is there any dissent to the motion? No dissent, so that's carried. Thank you, and that's a decision of committee. 38A Nicholas Drive and 24 Gardenia Grove and Nicholas Drive. This is a fire trail. Alderman Barakis, you happy to move that?
Move that, Chair.
Thank you. Discussion. And I believe that we're at pains to try and keep those communities of globulus and where possible Pulchella as safe as possible, Mr. Noy.
Yeah, that's correct. They've council have been careful in designing the route of the fire trail to avoid the significant globulus species there. So we're reasonably satisfied by that.
Okay, thank you. I'll put the motion. Is there any dissent? Councillor Harvey's walking off, but I don't think he's dissenting. Okay, so that's carried unanimously. Now we move to supplementary item 42 to 44 Burnett Street. So it's item 14 on page 553.
No, sorry, Chair. I was advised since the meeting started, sorry for not declaring it at the beginning. I think I need to, is this the Burnett Street one you said?
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Yep.
I will need to declare an interest in this one, Chair.
Okay.
And given that the rest of the items are, I think, just reports, I might actually take my leave at this point because I do have another thing I have to go to. So
okay, thank you, Alderman Barakis, for your attendance. So Alderman Barakis has declared an interest. So you've had a chance to have a look at that memo. Everybody, can I have somebody? Is there any explanation that's required? So it really gives us delegation as a committee, and if there's a tied vote, given time and so forth, Mr. Noy will take on the rather hard task of having to make a decision on our behalf. So can I have somebody move that, please? Councillor Harvey, thank you, or Councillor Coates, you almost got in. Any discussion? No discussion, so, or Councillor Harvey, did you want to say anything?
No.
Okay, all right, so I'll put the motion. Is there any dissent to the motion for that delegation? Carried unanimously. Where are we now, Dave? Back to reports. Reports 8.1 City Planning Advertising Report on the original agenda. Have somebody move that, please, or Councillor Dutty, you have. Thank you. Can we have that received and noted? Is any dissent? Thank you. Declared that carried unanimously. 8.2 Delegated Decisions Report. And can I have somebody move that, please? And Ms. Abbey, apart from, oh, is there anything that you want to raise with us, please? Oh, sorry, am I? Oh, sorry, which one am I going? So delegated decisions. Oh, did I do the advertise? Sorry, I
Yes.
Go back to the advertising report. Sorry, advertising report. Can we have Alderman Briscoe? Thank you for moving that. Karen, can you advise, please?
Yes, the most significant application that's on the list is one at the property at 125 Bathurst Street, which is also known as, which also links up with 130 Murray Street for 7 multiple dwellings and food services. That matter's going to UDAP later this week.
And that's the former O'Brien's windscreen, isn't it? No, sorry.
No, that's a separate application. It's a busy street at the moment. It's currently on the Murray Street side. There's a white building. I can't remember the name of the building, and I can't actually recall the Bathurst Street frontage at the moment. Sorry, Deputy.
Yeah, you're right. It's one that's been before committee before in a similar form. I think it ran out of time, and they're bringing it back in a similar but not exact form as previously approved by council.
Through you, Chair, will that have to conform with the new multi-residential building guidelines?
Through you, Chair, yes, it will. Yes, those amendments commence on the 19th of November, so that application won't be able to be determined before that date.
Okay.
Okay, I really did think that was Windscreens O'Brien, but I must have been mistaken. Okay, so Alderman Briscoe, you moved to receive and note that. Is there any dissent? No dissent. Thank you. 8.1's carried. We've already carried 8.2. Item 9 is questions without notice. Any questions without notice? I have a question. Sorry, Mr. Noy, you're getting sick of this. Just in relation to deputations, is there any way that deputations from family members can be not considered? You know, like there's sometimes like we had one today where a family member has put in a deputation in relation to an item. Is there any reason why or why not people who might be related to the applicant would put in deputation or representation? Sorry. Thank you. Okay, so no other questions without notice. Can I ask somebody move?
I understand you might be in the same room, but at least I thought you were on mute. So.
Yeah. No, that. Sorry,
you and then the chair said thank you, but none of us could hear it.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Coates. I indicated that I probably should take that one on notice, and will provide a written response. Thank you.
Councillor Coates, are you happy to move that we close this portion of the meeting?
Yes, I moved that we close this and go. Sorry, close the open and go into the closed.
Thank you. Any dissent? No dissent. Thank you, and thank you to the public who have stayed this long. We had a few technical issues, and it has been quite a long meeting, finishing at 7:33. Thank you.